Hi, I'm Sade. Welcome to Coffee Bookshelves. Today we are talking about this book, The Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. Now I wanted to come down to the lake to record this vlog because we're going to be talking about some pretty deep topics like burning down the patriarchy, and I thought it would be nice to do it in a soothing location like the lakeshore, but it's a very windy day and everybody is here and the lake is going nuts, so we're just going to do our best. So if this was an episode of Friends, this would be called the angry one or the rageful one or the let's burn it all down one. How does all this anger relate to the book The Iron Widow? It is set in a futuristic reimagining of medieval China, and the central character is an 18-year-old girl called Zhao, who is extremely angry. She is a burning column of fury. Why is she so angry? There are three key reasons. Firstly, her bound feet. I was going to try and summarize this, but actually there's a really good passage and I'll just read it. In the skin-cracking winter when I was 5, when the cold pressed in so ruthlessly that the rice terraces froze solid, my grandmother forced me to walk over the ice with no shoes. After the cold crystallized deep into my flesh, turning it purple, she shooed all the men out of our house, sat me down on the frosted concrete ground, and soaked my feet in a wooden basin of boiled pig's blood and numbing medicine. Then 2 of my aunts held me down against the floor as my grandmother broke every bone along the arches of my feet to crush them in half. So her toes and arches were broken and then bound against the soles of her feet with cloth. And in the process, she lost 3 toes, barely survived multiple infections, and now can barely walk. Foot binding was a Chinese custom that was eventually banned in 1912. And the purpose of it was to make girls' feet small and dainty and what they called golden lotus feet, so that they would be more appealing to men and therefore they'd be more marriageable. It aligns with the idea of women being helpless. If you can barely walk or support your own weight, you become quite dependent. Second reason are what I would call female batteries. Zhao Tian's world has been invaded by a powerful race of aliens, and they are barely holding them at bay. And their only useful, effective weapon that they have are these giant flying machines called chrysalises, which have to be flown by 2 pilots, a male pilot and a female concubine pilot. And the girl is basically used as a battery, like her life force powers the machine until she's drained and dies. The third cause of Zhao Tian's anger is grief. Her older sister was sold by the family to the army as a concubine pilot and died, so she's determined to avenge her death. So the story really kicks off when Zhao Tian signs herself up for the army. She wants to infiltrate it and find her way to the celebrated pilot who was involved in her sister's death and avenge her. I cannot articulate how much I love the character Zhao Tian and how much her fury and anger at a world that devalues and exploits and harms women mirrors my anger. I once went on a date with a guy. It was date number 1, and somewhere along the line, during lunch, he said, "Don't you think that the women's rights movement has gone too far?" And I commended myself afterwards on taking a Claire Huxtable moment before I answered. Before I said, how far is too far when you're fighting for your human rights? Where would you stop if you were treated like a second-class human being? And then we just looked at each other for a moment. And then I said, so what do you like to do in your spare time? When I hear the phrase angry feminist, I think it's so redundant. It's like saying wet water or hot pepper, because what else would a feminist be? I wonder at the people that say it in a condescending way, like, what are the things that make you angry? You know, maybe your DoorDash arrives late and, you know, your food is cold, or your taxes have gone up again, or climate change, because, you know, nobody wants to die a fiery ball. I think that if I can accept the legitimacy of your DoorDash troubles, you can accept my anger at the fact that women have been oppressed basically since the beginning of human existence. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie calls herself a happy feminist in response to people saying that feminists are just unhappy women. So she's like, fine, I am a happy feminist. However, she draws a line when people urge her to get rid of the word feminist at all. She said, feminism is, of course, part of human rights in general, but to choose to use the vague expression human rights is to deny the specific and particular problem of gender. It would be pretending that it was not women who have for centuries been excluded. It would be denying that the problem of gender targets women, that the problem was not about being human, but specifically about being a female human. Zhao Tian's anger isn't targeted at men. Feminism isn't anti-male. We all live in a patriarchal system. It is the air we breathe, it is the water that surrounds us. It's when you decide to become a foot soldier for the patriarchy and you want to enforce it and embed it and deepen and expand it, that you become a problem, and that I would say that you end up on Zhao Tian's hit list. I think there's another passage in here that speaks to it really well. It was my grandmother who crushed my feet in half. It was my mother who encouraged me and big sister to offer ourselves up as concubines so our brother could afford a future bride. It was always the village aunties who'd sit around gossiping about which girl hadn't been married off yet, despite complaining non-stop about their own husbands. And then they'd congratulate new mothers for being blessed to have a boy, despite being female themselves. How do you take the fight out of half the population and render them willing slaves? You tell them they're meant to do nothing but serve from the minute they're born. You tell them they're weak, and you tell them they're prey. You tell them over and over until it's the only truth they're capable of living. So Zhao Tian joins the army and turns out to be a brilliant pilot, and then starts plotting how to bring the system down from the inside. The book is absolute fire. The writing in Iron Widow is beautiful and evocative. The action is gripping. The characters are deep, they are multi-layered, they are distinctive. And Zhao Tian is just stunning. She is daring and bold, and she is so done with the status quo, and she is ready to torpedo through anybody who wants to defend that system. I love her. The main character is actually based on the only female empress in Chinese history, Wu Zhao, just FYI. The book is the first in a duology. It is currently being adapted into a film. It is dazzling and luminous and absolutely wonderful. It is The Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao.